right, cool. We are recording. So we are here today with Chrissy. And Chrissy, tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, and the story to how you got there.
Okay. I live in Salisbury by the beach. I am a chef. I currently own a business called Badass Brands, and I do catering, personal chef services, like a weekly meal service, and I teach cooking classes. And we also do culinary retreats in various places, like we just did Greece a couple years ago. So that's the name of the business, and how the business came to be is quite the story. So my original background is education. I was a teacher. I took care of children and families for a long time. And back in 2011, I think it was, no, I'm sorry, it's about 9 years ago. So there was a tragedy in my family, and I ended up losing my 4-bedroom home. I had to put everything in storage. And I was sleeping in my car for like 2 weeks with 2 dogs, thinking, what am I going to do? Like, I was in shock, I think, because I really didn't think it was going to happen. And then it happened, and ended up renting a room from somebody, and that was a terrible situation. So the whole thing was just, okay, how did I get here? And that was a frame I say a lot. I feel like that's a theme that comes up in my life a lot. Like, how the fuck did I get here? I joke with people about that. I'm going to write a book, and that's going to be the title. So I ended up moving in with a friend who reached out to me on Facebook that I hadn't seen in about 20 years. And she knew I was in a bad situation. And she said, I have a room for rent. Why don't you come over? If your dogs get along with my dog, I'd love for you to come and stay. So it worked out. I didn't have any way to pay my rent. So I offered to cook for the family in exchange for rent. And cooking became very healing to me. I enjoyed it. I found that I was really good at it. And one of her children was actually in culinary school while I was living there. And I thought, oh, maybe I should do something, because I was like, what am I going to do with my life? So I said, maybe I'll go back to school. I think I was like 46, and I was like, okay. So I ended up signing up for culinary school. Everybody thought I was crazy. I thought I was crazy. And it was wonderful. I was so in love with it. I was like, oh my God, this is something I should have done 20 years ago. And it just became like so natural to me, but through the whole couple of years I was in school, I kept telling everybody, oh, I'll never work in a restaurant. Like I was going to open a bed and breakfast. That was my plan. And I said, oh, restaurants are horrible. I would never work in a restaurant. But sadly, I found out when I graduated, I was originally from Worcester, and I couldn't find a job. I had gone to every kitchen, and every time I walked into the kitchen, they were all men. So it was a real male-dominated industry. And my age didn't help, because I was older. And I'm a bigger woman. So a lot of people, I had people say, well, you got 3 strikes against you. And I was like determined, though. So I did end up finding a job, but it was only part-time at Tower Hill Botanical Gardens in Boylston. And it was beautiful, and I loved it, but they couldn't give me full-time hours. So I was really struggling. I needed income so I could find a place to live still 2 years later. And we had been vacationing at the beach. I had a seasonal camp spot up at Salisbury for like 15 years. We go every summer. So one of my friends said, why don't you look up in Newburyport? There's restaurants everywhere, apply there. So I went to the Grog in Newburyport. I applied. I got hired on the spot. And I was like, oh my, okay. And then I ended up finding a studio apartment in Salisbury, like right by the beach. And things started, working out really well. And it was wonderful. I worked there for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, and learned everything I could learn. And then I ended up moving over to the Plum Island Grill. And the thing people don't realize when you work in kitchens, you have to work your way up. You don't just graduate and get a chef title. So I knew I wanted that title, and I worked my ass off. I really did. Like, I went from every station and I learned everything I could. And, all the way up to saute. And after about a year or so I was there, the sous chef left and they offered me the sous chef position. So I was over the moon. I was like, oh my God, yes, yes. So, and I was there for a couple of years, and then COVID hit. And it was awful because I had made friends with all the islanders. This was on Plum Island. I had made a lot of friends. It was my family. But then COVID hit, and everything got shut down. And I stayed for a little while because we did take out for a while, but then he just couldn't afford to pay me. So I stepped down about 2021, and I was like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do now? It was kind of like a panic, like, all right, here I am again, back to square one, because restaurants weren't hiring because they weren't open. So I said, okay, I don't know. I'm going to create something. I had businesses along the way. I've always been an entrepreneur. So I said, well, I've got to make this work. So I created, everyone kept telling me through all the struggles I had that I was a badass. That was what people would call me. So I was like, all right, I'm going to create a brand so then I can take that brand and do whatever I want with it. Because there's so many ways you can go in the culinary world. And I had wanted to open up some type of a cooking school at the same time. So I created badass brands, and I made the logo. It's like a crown because I wanted to be sort of feminine, like, adjust your crown, remember who you are. And I used the ocean colors, and everybody loved it. And things were going great. We were open for about a year, and things were slow and then busy and then slow and then busy. And then it was 2022. Things were really picking up, like, going so well. We were booked solid. And around the beginning of December, I just started to feel horrible. I was like, oh, something's not right. I don't know. But I ignored it. I gotta work. I gotta keep charging through. And I had kidney stones in the past because I started to get a lot of pain in the abdomen. And I thought, okay, it's kidney stones. It's got to be kidney stones. And it started to get worse and not better. So I had one more event for the holidays because it was like right before Christmas. And I said, all right, the night before, my temperature reached 104 and I ended up passing out. And I got up and I was like, okay, this is not kidney stones. Something's really wrong. I said, all right, I'm just going to get through the event tomorrow and then I'll go to the emergency room. So I remember getting through the event. At the end of the event, I was so tired, and my sous chef knew, I was going to the emergency room. And I looked at her and I said, I don't know what's going on. I said, I feel like I'm carrying a toddler around or something. Like, something's just not right. So I went to the ER in Seabrook. Well, it's not an ER. It's a medical center type of thing. And I went in there and I told them what was going on, and they did scans. And the doctor comes right in and sits next to me and says, you have a massive tumor in your uterus, and I believe it's cancer. And if you don't get operated on tonight, you're not going to make it. And I looked at him like, that's how you tell somebody? Like, I couldn't even believe that's how he was telling me, because I was there alone too. Like, I just couldn't believe that he just said, I believe it's cancer. Like, and he's like, I'm sorry, but I do. And I was like, wow, okay. So he's like, the only problem is he couldn't find a hospital with a bed. So he kept calling, and I was like, well, I'm originally from Worcester. If you can find a hospital in Worcester, my family's there, I'd prefer to go there. And like 2 hours had gone by, and I was on the phone with my friend, and she's like, what is going on? And I said, I don't know. So he finally found a hospital in Springfield, which was 2.5 hours away. But he couldn't find an ambulance to come and get me. So another hour or so had gone by, and my friend was like, listen, I will take her there. Like, this is ridiculous. And they said, well, you can't, because once we discharge her, she becomes out of the system and she'll lose the bed. So we were like, this is crazy. So another hour had gone by, and finally they agreed to let us go. They agreed to let her take me, and somehow they figured out how they could keep it in the system. So we leave. Now it's pouring out. It's like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. It is pouring buckets out. We start heading to Springfield, and 30 minutes into the ride, her car breaks down. And I'm like, oh, you thought I'd be kidding me. So I'm like, it's okay. We'll call an ambulance, and then they'll have to take me, right? So we call the police, and ambulance comes, and they're like, we can't take you to Springfield. We're only allowed to go 15 minutes out. We have to stay in the district. So I'm like, well, this is ridiculous. I'm gonna die. And they're like, we're sorry, we can't do anything but take you to a different hospital. And I'm like, well, that's not going to help me. So her husband ended up coming to pick us both up. We left the car there, and they drove me to the hospital. I think we got there at like 2:30 in the morning, and it was just awful. And they dropped me off. They made sure I got in, and they rushed me in and got me all ready to go. And they were like, okay, this is going to be a big surgery. You need to call your family because there's a 50-50 chance. Like, they're like, you might not make it, and your family needs to know that. So I was like, wow. So I was terrified because I was alone, and I called my kids, and I called my father, and I was like, wow, this is awful. And then I called a friend because I had this, she was kind of a new friend to me. But I remember her saying to me, because it was now like 5 o'clock in the morning, she said to me, if you ever need anything or you need to talk to anybody, call me. I don't care what time it is. So I ended up calling her, and she was just like, wow, and she was wonderful. She kind of like talked me through it because I was just so terrified. All you think is, I'm going to go in and I may not come out, like all these thoughts go through. So went into surgery, and I think it was like a 5-hour surgery. And I come out, and the doctor tells me that they removed the tumor, but there was another tumor that was strangling 3 of my organs. It was like tree roots wrapped around, and then it went up my abdomen like a head of broccoli. She said she'd never seen anything like it in her life. And I was like, wow, but she got all of them out. They had to do a full hysterectomy. She said everything went great. And, but you're going to be here for a few days. And I said, okay, that's fine. And so I was there about a day and a half. And it was a few days before Christmas. And I remember this nurse come bouncing in, all, oh my God, I've got great news. You're getting discharged today. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, what are you talking about? And she goes, oh yeah. And I said, no, 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 no. You get the doctor on the phone. I'm supposed to be here for 4 or 5 days. And she was like, okay. So she left, and she comes back, and she goes, yeah, you're right. I talked to the surgeon. You're all set. So I'm like, okay, great. About an hour later, she comes back, and she goes, I'm so sorry, but they already discharged you. You have to go home. And I was like, I live 2.5 hours away. Like, I don't even have a ride home. And she was like, oh no, this guy pulls into my room with a wheelchair. She said, no, we got you a ride. So they called a wheelchair van to come and drive me home. So I'm in tears now. I'm so hysterical. Like, you've got to be kidding me. But now I'm also so angry. I just wanted to be gone. I was like, fine, whatever. And so I got up and I went, and it was a horrible ride home as I was bouncing all up and down in the van and whatnot. And I went home, and I got home, and I thought, okay, I'm home. This is, it is what it is. So I stayed that night, went to bed, everything. I get up the next day, I'm going about my day, and at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I sit down, and all this black liquid comes pouring out of my incision. Now, I had an incision the entire way of my abdomen. Like, it was huge. So I called the surgeon. I'm like, something's not right. And she said, oh my God, get to the emergency room now. So I end up back at the emergency room, and this was an actual hospital in Newburyport. And they do scans, and they're like, you need emergency surgery right now, or you're not going to make it. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. They're like, no, we have to get you to Boston because they couldn't do the surgery there. So I was like, okay. So they get me in an ambulance and they transport me to Beth Israel in Boston. And I have another surgeon, and it's like deja vu all over again. You might not make it, call your family, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wow. So I go into this surgery and I come out and find out it was a 10-hour surgery, like 10 hours to save my life. And I was floored because a few months before, my dad had like open heart surgery. Like he had a tumor underneath his heart, and they had to take all of his organs out, pull his heart out, remove the tumor, and then put everything back. And it was 4 or 5 hours. So I'm thinking, what in the world were they doing in there for 10 hours? But apparently, the doctor in the first surgery had nicked my colon and nobody knew it. And had they kept me in the hospital, it probably wouldn't have been so bad. But because they sent me home, I was septic. There was feces like everywhere. And the surgeon said, yeah, it was really, really bad. You're very lucky to be alive. And I was like, wow. And then he ends up telling me that I have a colostomy bag. And I'm like, I lose my mind. And he's like, it's reversible. Don't worry. Cause sometimes they're not, and he's like, no, you'll have it for about 6 months and then we should be able to reverse it and whatnot. And I was like, okay. And then I find out from the first surgeon that the tumors she removed weren't, there was no cancer. So I'm like, okay, that's great. I was shocked, but I was so happy. But, then I'm dealing with this. So it was a difficult surgery. I ended up spending 5 months in the hospital and a month in rehab. And it was really, really hard. Like I had to learn how to do everything, like from making a cup of tea. I couldn't, because when you're in a bed for so long, you lose your sense of everything. So that was a really rough road to recovery. And it was getting to be about the time for my reversal, like 5 months had gone by, and they called me in because they had to check everything. So they needed to do a colonoscopy to make sure everything was okay. And I'm so excited because I can't wait for this reversal because I can't work in a kitchen like this. And I go to the colonoscopy and I'm like, all right, and I wake up and I come to, and the doctor says to me, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but we found a tumor in your colon and we're 99% sure it's cancer. And it was like a punch in the gut. Like, you've got to be kidding me, like, because I did not expect that in any way. I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be great. I'm going to get this reversed and this will be the end of this nightmare. And they said, no. So then I had to go see a colon doctor, oncologist, and it was a whole nother surgery. So I got switched to another surgeon. And that was not fun. So they scheduled the surgery. They're going to reverse it and hopefully remove all the cancer. And we do the surgery. And I come out, they had nicked my bladder. So I have this bag hanging off of me. And I'm in a lot of pain. And like 2 days go by and they're like, you can go home. And I'm like, no, something's not right. I'm in a lot of pain. And they kept trying to tell me it was because of the bladder. They're like, oh, it's very painful when you nick the bladder. And I kept looking at her going, I don't think so. And she said, no, trust me, you'll be fine. You'll feel better in the morning. And they sent me home. And I couldn't stop throwing up. I threw up all night. The next day, back to the emergency room I go. The reversal failed. It was leaking in 3 different places. And I was septic again. And of course, they should never have sent me home yet again. And now I have to go back in for another surgery. So we go in for the surgery. And I wake up from that surgery, and now I have, it's called an ileostomy. It's different from a colostomy bag, but it's more liquid than solid waste, but it's the same thing. And it's worse, in fact. And they tell me I have what's called fistulas, that connections were leaking and they couldn't find the leaks, and I'm going to need more surgery. And I'm just like beside myself. Like, I can't even take anymore, you know? So I end up having another surgery. And then, I'm in the hospital for like 3 months, and I'm begging to go home at this point because this has gone on for over a year now, and I'm going to lose my apartment. And I'm like, I need to get home. And they didn't want to send me home, but I was like, I have to go home or I'm going to lose everything. So they sent me home, and it was because at that point I had 3 bags hanging off of me because I had so many infections, they like one of them literally traveled through my stomach. I could see it, and I'm looking at it going, what in the world is that? And it like forced itself out, and like it's like you spring this leak, and it was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. But so I ended up with 3 bags on me because the leaks just kept coming, and it was awful. And also in between that, which I didn't know, so I go home, they send me home, and I'm just so sick again. I straightened out what I need to straighten out. I'm home about a week and a half, and my neighbor says, "You don't look good." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't feel that great." And I start throwing up again. Back to the emergency room I go. They do a surgery. They found one of the leaks. I was so infected. I had 8 bags hanging off of me, now drains coming out of me. They couldn't get this infection like under control. And it was just crazy. And so they do another surgery. It doesn't go good. They want to go back in like a week later. They go back in, and I remember I woke up and I was tied. My hands were tied to the bed. I had all this stuff coming out. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I didn't recognize anyone. I was so drugged up. I literally thought I had been kidnapped. Like, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, they couldn't fix me. They're going to steal my organs. Like, that's what I thought was, when you're on all those drugs, all these things go through your head. And I didn't recognize any of the staff. So I was like, I'm not even in the same hospital, I'm thinking. Um, a couple days go by, and I'm just like, at this point, I'm like begging God. They tell me you're in critical care. You're really, really, really bad. You almost died again, but they saved you. And they're like, so I could tell it's like a whole another team of doctors, and they were like scared. Like, I could see it. And it was awful. At that point, I just wanted to die. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Just I was begging God, just please take me. I can't, I'm done. But he didn't. And I had to tough it out. And it was absolute hell. I spent another 3 months in the hospital, and they did another surgery, and it was a different doctor this time, and she was wonderful, and she ended up reversing the bag and finding the leaks and everything. But because I had had so many surgeries, I had had 7 at this point, they couldn't close the lining of my stomach. It just wouldn't fit together. And I developed a massive hernia, and it was rough. But I had to stay at the hospital again, and then I went into another rehab program. And in the midst of all these surgeries, I had fractured my spine. So I couldn't even stand. Now I'm in a wheelchair. It was just, before, when I first got out of that first surgery, they had to lift me by machine to bring me to a bathroom or to do anything, because I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. It was awful. Um, and by the time, even when I went to rehab, my back was still so bad. And they couldn't figure out how I fractured it. It was fractured in 3 places. And my friend is a nurse, and she said, I'm telling you right now, they dropped you, moving you from a surgical bed into your bed, or from your bed to the surgical bed. Somebody dropped you, and they're just not telling you. And I was just like, I have to agree. I don't know how else it could have happened. So I'm in like horrible shape. And I finally get home December of 2024, because this had gone on since 2022. So it's 2 years now. And I'm home, and I know I have another surgery, but the issue was, because I'd been so immobile, I had gained 85 pounds. And I was also on this IV nutrition because of all the leaks. I wasn't allowed to eat any food or drink any liquid because it would just pour out of me. So I had to be fed through an IV, and this nutrition is full of fat, like there's a lot of fat. So I gained all this weight. And because my stomach isn't holding together, it was pulling everything to the side. So the doctor was like, we can't do the final surgery, which would be to fix the hernia and finally close the stomach. I was supposed to have it done last fall, and I can't, they can't do it. So we wait, and I still have that surgery. And then when I did come home in December, I ended up falling at midnight. I went up to get a drink, and I slipped and fell and fractured my shoulder. So I was like, I couldn't use my arm. I'm in a wheelchair. It was awful. And, and I had been, it took me a good year and a half in rehab physical therapy um, to just even be able to function. It's been such a journey. And through all of this, all I kept thinking is I'm going to lose my business because, I can't do anything. But I will tell you, the community here in Salisbury really rallied around me. The other businesses up at the beach, because I joined the chamber, and they're all part of the chamber. They all rallied against, not against me, rallied for me. They helped me. They paid my rent. They helped me with bills and food, and they just kept plugging my business, like, so it wouldn't go unheard of, and people would just know she's coming back. Don't you worry, she's coming back. So I did start back up last summer, and it's been really difficult. I mean, because I am disabled still, I use a cane, and I can't stand for more than 7 minutes. But I'm still doing big catering jobs, and it's funny because I'll go to a client's house who has never met me before, and I get out of the car into the door, and I'm in my cane, and sometimes they gasp, they like, oh, you're the caterer? And it's like, yeah, I'm the caterer. And then once we set it all up and do our thing, because I have a team as well, they're like blown away because they're like, wow, wow. And to me, sometimes I had to sit there and say, gosh, I'm still doing it, even though I can't. I mean, there are days I can't, but I'm still trudging along and still, pushing through. And I mean, I definitely earned the badass name at this point. But yeah, it's been, like I said, it's been the toughest time of my life. But, I kept saying, God's not done with me. I made it 3 times, and, 3 times is a charm. So I feel like there's a purpose here for me. And, my biggest thing, I think I said in the beginning, was I wanted to open up a cooking school, especially for kids. Like, teenagers was my target at first, because when I was in the restaurant, that was my favorite thing to do, was when the teenagers would come, to teach them how to cook was like everything, because just to see their faces light up when they could make a sauce or plated a beautiful salad, they would beam with joy. And I was like, I want, because my original background's education. So I was like, oh, I'd love to merge the two together. So I'm actually launching this summer, Kids Rule Cooking School, because I wanted to do it, but it was like, well, I can't use the badass name in there because it's kids. So I had to come up with a whole nother name for that part of the business, and logo and everything. And I'm excited about that. And, some people are like, wow, you just keep going. And I'm like, and I have to, and I want to be that example for other people who have gone through medical trauma, or, anything like that I've gone through, or even something different, to know you just can't give up. You just got to keep trudging through, and, one day at a time, and just not give up. Because I could have easily just felt sorry for myself and never gone back to work, and just sit around and, ask the government to take care of me. But I've never lived that way. So it wasn't an option. so, yeah, that's my story pretty much.
That's an incredible story. So,
Thanks.
so a couple of years ago was kind of when all of that ended and you started getting back out into the workspace. What was that like going back into, I mean, I'm sure it must have felt really scary.
Yeah,
Um,
it was hard. I forgot to mention, they did get all the cancer,
mhm,
even though the bag didn't work. They did remove all the cancer, so I am cancer free. So that was a blessing.
that's
You know,
amazing.
and a lot of people tell me, well, not to, I could kind of look at the whole thing as a blessing because if all this hadn't happened, they may not have found the cancer. It was only stage
Yeah.
two. And it, it could have sat there and grown and grown and grown. So I try to look at it that way as well. But yeah, when I went back at it, it was hard because I can't stand very long. So I have to, I go to cook as long as I can stand, and then I have to go and sit and
Mm.
sit for a couple of minutes, and then I'm up because it's funny because people will say I'll show up, with all this food, like trays and trays of food, and they're like, how did you make all this like that? And I'm like,
Yeah.
it wasn't easy.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
not gonna lie, that's kind of my first thought is how do you make a giant buffet of food when you can't even stand for longer than 7 minutes?
yeah, I have a team for that. The
Mhm,
cooking part I can do, and I do a lot of like I have a special table that I sit at
mhm,
to prep. And so I only try to stand. At first, I didn't do that. I was trying to be Miss Badass, and I thought I
mm,
could. I thought, if as I stood and chopped and prepped, it would strengthen me and I would get better, but it doesn't happen that way because of the stomach lining being open. I have no core,
mm,
so it's not going to get better. My back won't get better until this is all closed back up. Like even physical therapy, she was like, there isn't much more I can do for you until you have that final surgery. So I finally had to accept, okay, I got to find another way to do this. And that's just what
mhm,
I do. I definitely don't do everything the way I did it. And it takes me a lot longer than it did before, but I give myself grace and I say, okay, it was hard. There were days where I would get really upset and angry because it would be like, this is so unfair. Like, why me? There's no cancer in my family. I'm the first person on either side, my parents, to have cancer. So that was another, like, wow.
mm,
But I was angry. I was really angry for probably a whole year. And then I just said, you know what? You got to stop. Because if I sit in that anger and never get out, I'm never going to get better and it's not going to help. So I've done a lot of therapy.
mm,
Um, I have a mentor that works with me that really helps me work through those feelings and say, okay, this is temporary and just breathe. I learned a lot of breathing exercises because it is difficult to do it, but I can do it. And I've got a mantra now too, because I say, okay, you can, when I'm going to do something that I know is going to be difficult, I literally talk myself into
mm.
it. Like I say, you
Yeah.
can do this, you can do this. And then once I finally do it, I sit down and I tell myself now, I'm so proud of you,
Mm,
which is huge. I learned from my mentor that it's really important to tell yourself those things, to hear it in your brain and to say
mhm,
it out loud because it gives you that reinforcement of I can do hard things. I just have to get through it. And that's changed me a lot because I don't think I was like that before all of this.
yeah. I don't think most people's natural default is that kind of amazing resilience.
Yeah,
That's yeah.
it's definitely changed me a lot. I'm a different person, but I'm not, if that makes sense. I definitely deal with things a lot different. Like I have a neighbor, like the apartment upstairs from me is like cursed. It's one bad neighbor after another.
Mhm,
And years ago, I would have been like a screaming, angry neighbor. And now I'm just, okay, I'm gonna put on a good song that brings me joy. And I
yeah.
can't I can't let that get to me. So I've gained a lot of skills, which I also want to share with people.
Mhm,
So when I do go out to do my culinary retreats, I do want to add an aspect to that for people. Like we want to make one of them geared for people who've been through medical trauma because I feel like food is healing as well, and like sort of combine that and teach people the skills that I've learned. Because
Mhm,
my God, if I can get through what I've gotten through, I can certainly help other people get through what they're going through. Because
mhm.
it was a lot. I mean, I remember one of the times I went to the emergency room and they had told me I couldn't have another surgery, that my body wouldn't take it, and they thought it was my gallbladder. And I remember there was this little boy next to me, um, and he was whiny and he didn't feel good. And I was on the phone the whole time crying to my sister saying, I can't do another surgery. They told me I'll die. And I was really upset saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm all done. And I was so upset. And I'll never forget when that family left, the nurse came over and that little boy made a card for me because, the family saw how much I was suffering, so when I tell people I've been through it, it's like I've been through it and through it and through it and through it. Like, so, and I hope that I can turn that into something where I help other people, because I spent a lot of time in the hospital. I mean, I don't know anybody who spent as much time in the hospital as almost an entire year. Um, I mean, the nurses, they all knew me, so well. Um, when I finally left, they literally lined the hospital floor, and I got a standing ovation when they were wheeling me out because they were like so happy to see me finally going home. But it has been difficult with the business, and there are days where someone will call me and I'll be like, oh, God, I don't know if I can do that. And then it's like, but if I don't try, then I'll never know, and it's so I take every job that comes my way, and even if it's really hard, I just do it. I find a way to talk myself through it, and I do it. And then when I get home after the night's over, I'm really, really proud of myself and my whole team, because they definitely work harder for me now that I can't do a lot. So that makes a difference to have a good team behind you. And
Yeah, it sounds like you've been relying on your team a lot, which is amazing. And it's amazing that you even have a team. There's so many people that are kind of doing the solo thing in their business. So
yeah.
did you have a team from the start, or is that something you had to get together after everything?
No, the team that I have is actually from the restaurant that I worked in, because we were all kind of out of work with COVID. So yeah, as soon as I asked people, I said, I need a sous chef, I need servers. And everyone was like, yeah, I'm in. And they know it's not full time. They all have other jobs too, but eventually I told them it will be full time. Um, but they've stuck with me through the whole thing. Like even when I was in the hospital, they all came to my house the first time. I had been gone for 5 months and cleaned my entire apartment for me so that I would come home to a nice clean apartment. I mean, they emptied my fridge. They just and they're still with me through this whole thing. And I have great customers who have stuck with me through the whole thing. And the community too up here. They were wonderful. Like I lost all my hair. The lady who owns the salon in town, she had me come in and she bought me a wig, and helped me style it, and any whatever I needed. The lady who owns the Salisbury Discount House, she called me at the hospital and was like, "Is there anything I can send you?" And you don't realize they don't have at a hospital till you have to stay there for a long time. And I was like, I would kill for a nail file and some nail clippers, because my nails were like claws and they don't have anything there. So she sent a manicurist to the hospital to give me a mani and pedi. And it was one of the best gifts I'd ever received. It was so nice. So I think that makes all the difference too, that, really helped me to get through it and to stick with it. And, them telling me they believe me and believe in me and know that I can do it and get back on my feet made a huge difference for sure. But
That's incredible. So you had such a great support system around you, and it feels almost like that in itself is such a big blessing, you
yeah,
know? that
for
you even
sure.
had a team like that around you that could support you during that really difficult time. I am
Mhm.
curious, I'd like to go back in time a little bit to when you were
Sure.
first building your business. You said it happened like during COVID, right? COVID happened. You guys all had to leave your. So what was that like trying to build a catering business in the middle of COVID when nobody's hosting events?
I
I
know.
can't imagine
Well,
how that happens.
well, it was a little after things had opened back up. I think they were allowing like groups of 50, like you could have 50
Mm,
people at events and stuff like that. So it wasn't like nobody needed catering because they did.
mhm,
But I also I really started taking off the local businesses in town reached out to me to cook meals for them during the week also for the summer because I would never have thought of this, but they're like, we can only eat so much pizza, like, so they're like, could you make us some healthy lunches every day? And,
wow, that's
and
yeah.
yeah, so that really, really got me started. So I started cooking for like 5 different families and bringing them like a week's worth of lunches and dinners for some of them.
Mhm,
And they just passed the word, like they gave my name out to people. So I was getting a lot of catering jobs from those families. Um, and I still do. I still cook for a lot of families in town, which, they really missed it when I was in the hospital. Cause that, you think when you're in the hospital, are these people going to find somebody else?
mm,
Are they going to like somebody else's cooking and not come back to me? And, I had other entrepreneurs who had started food businesses at the same time as I did because of COVID, and I'm laying in a hospital bed watching them grow and thrive. And while
yeah,
I'm happy, I was also heartbroken thinking, oh my God, that should be me, I should be,
yeah,
but I just had to keep telling myself it will be, all of this had to happen for a reason. I keep saying, I definitely needed to slow down in my life because I was
mhm,
a, balls to the wall worker type of person and I never stopped. So this has slowed me down in a way I probably never would have on my own. Um, and it was probably really needed for me to, because now I can pivot and do things different. Like one of my fellow culinary students actually reached out to me the other day and said, I'm so proud of you because you're doing things at your own leisure. He's like, you're not trapped in a restaurant. You're not stuck working 80 hours a week. And he said, and by starting that kids cooking school, he's like, you're going to change lives. And I was like, oh, I never even thought of it that way. Like, because I had told him I wanted to get teens in there, local teens who couldn't afford culinary school and plug them in with area restaurants because they're always looking for help and it would, solve a problem. And, I didn't really think about it. He's like, you're going to change a lot of lives. You're going to make a difference. And I was like, wow, that's so kind of you. Like, thank you for saying that. Um, so I try to look at all the good things that have come out of this that maybe wouldn't have if I hadn't gotten sick. And hopefully more good things will come of it. I do want to write a book. Everyone keeps telling me you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And I'm like, I do. I just don't know where to begin. I've got a few ideas, but it's definitely a story that needs to be shared and told because there's just so many things. I mean, even just having a colostomy bag, that was a whole life changing thing that people aren't even aware of how many people walk around with those and how horrible it is for them and embarrassing and like when you can't leave the house or you can't go and like there were times I had to go to the doctors and the bag is full and I'm in the medical van like oh my god you're praying nothing happens until you get to it's just a whole nother world and there's so many things that I went through and I kept asking God like more like really how many things you going to throw at me like, but I really believe that there's a reason for all of this and that I'm meant to help other people go through this because I am in a lot of groups now and I feel like I do help people that way with stuff because it was hard. I know how hard it was for me, and I kind of think that I'm a pretty capable person. So I know there are people who really struggle with it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. So a lot of it was just networking. Like you just knew a lot of the local people around and they all knew people too. So it was just being so well known in the area that you were
That was
able to have such support and grow your business despite all of the different struggles that you had.
Yeah, that was definitely it. Like the family that was first approached me for to cook for them for the whole summer.
Hmm.
It was the second summer I was cooking for them, and they right before I got sick, they had a party for the chamber at her business, and they had me cater it, and I got in and I set everything up, and it was like 95 degrees out. I was dying. So I'm like, all right, I gotta go. And she's like, no, I want you to come and stay for the meeting. And I'm like, I'm like, I need to shower. She's like, I want you to come back. It's a chamber meeting. I want you to meet the chamber people. And I was like, I don't think so, So I went home and I get a text from her. You need to come back here. There's a woman here looking for a caterer. And I was like, I'm not going to get out of this. So I showered, changed, and went back to the event. And it was probably the best thing I could have done, because she was like, you're joining the chamber. And because she was really trying to help me get my business name out there.
Hmm.
And I did. I joined the chamber, and all of those business owners, they are such a tight-knit community. It was probably the best thing I ever did, because they really did help me through the whole time I was in the hospital. And when I came home, they brought me things. They brought me meals, which was ironic. um, but they did. And I don't think I could have gotten through it without them. I really don't. And I tell people that. And it's funny because, I've only been here 9 years, and I spent probably a good 5 or 6 years of it out on Plum Island, because that's where I was working all the time. So I've really only gotten to know this community. Like, I had only been in the community maybe a year and a half, 2 years.
Hmm.
And as soon as I became ill, they were like right there for me. Like I had been here
Wow.
forever. And I tell people that all the time. Like, I am so blessed to be in this community. And they keep sharing my business and telling people about my business. And it's really what's kept me open and kept me
Yeah.
going, kept me wanting to keep going, and not like I could have looked for some type of at-home computer job and just given up. And I didn't. And I'm so glad I didn't.
That's amazing. And I
Yeah.
know you had mentioned that you went to Greece, which is crazy.
Oh
So
my
where
God.
does that fit into the timeline and how did
Mhm.
that come about?
So I had gone on a bunch of yoga retreats when I first moved up here. And I had always wanted to do a cooking retreat. I said, oh, wouldn't that be great? So I had planned one. I booked it in 2020, because you got to book them a year or two in advance. And it was supposed to happen in 2022. But then I had the surgery, so I had to bump it to 2023. And then, of course, more surgery, like it just never ended. So they let me bump it again to 2024. But if I didn't hold it, I was going to lose all the money. So it had to happen. So we were trying to plan this whole final surgery around 6 months before Greece, so I could go, and be somewhat normal. Well, that didn't happen. And I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? And I'm like, I'm going to have to go. And at first it was like, all right, I'm going to go. I can do this. I can do hard things, but I was traveling alone, and I didn't really even realize the scope of how difficult it was going to be, because it was really hard. When I got to the airport, because I needed wheelchair assistance, I was literally almost not using a wheelchair, but I had a rollator. I couldn't walk on my own. Um, so they plopped me in the wheelchair because I needed wheelchair assistance, and they just put me like right in the middle of the airport and said, someone will be with you. And I was like, okay. I'm looking all around and I'm going, wow, this is crazy. And I'm terrified. I've got my wheelator that I have to drag around everywhere with my luggage. And I'm thinking, okay. And then all of a sudden the tears just start flowing. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? What are you thinking? You can't go to Greece. I'm like, I'm talking myself out of it now, saying, no, you're just going to go home. This is nuts. And then, I start my breathing, go, no, you can't not go. There's people waiting for you. Like, you have to go. So I did. I sucked it up. And the journey there was so difficult. It was because I think I had to go on 3 different planes. And thank God I had wheelchair service, because some of the airports were like little towns, like miles and miles. I could never have wheeled through there with my wheelator. And I will say, the people who do cart you around on the wheelchair, they were wonderful. They were really good. But when I got to Greece, it was difficult because there's a lot of stairs. There's not many elevators. I went early because I knew it was going to be difficult for me. So I went a week before the retreat. So it took us about 3 days to travel. And then I wanted a few days to relax. And thank God I did that, because I was so wrecked from traveling. I literally slept for 2 whole days. Like, I couldn't move. I was so sore. But then I got up and I said, okay, I can't just sit in this bed. You're in Greece. Get your ass up, So I got up and started to feel normal again. And then that was great. But then I had to travel, because where the resort was an island called Amorgos. And the only way there or back is a ferry or a small plane. So I had booked 2 ferries. It's an 8-hour ride if you take one ferry, and sometimes if you can get a faster ferry, they can shorten it. So I had shortened it by like 2 hours by doing 2 ferries. Well, nobody told me when I got off the first ferry that the second ferry wasn't going to be waiting for me. So I get off the ferry and everybody's getting in cabs and leaving. And I'm like, what the fuck? And it's like 100 degrees. And I'm standing there with my rollator and my luggage, and I'm crying. And I'm like, where's the next boat? And one of the cab drivers says, oh, you got to go to the next port. And I'm like, nobody told me this. So I'm bawling. And some guy finally comes over and says he's going to get me a cab. So he gets me a cab, and this cab driver's not nice. He's yelling at me the whole time. And I'm like, listen, buddy, right? I'm like, you don't want to mess with me right now. So he gets me to the next port, and I get on. And getting on and off those boats was really difficult too, because I've got to lug this rollator. And don't forget, I had fractured shoulder too, so I could barely lift things. And I'm like, okay, so, and I had to really be strategic about where I sat on the boats, because I wanted to be the first one off or the last one. I didn't want to get trampled. Or have to stand in long lines, because I couldn't do it. So it was a never ending guessing game that way. And then once I finally got to the resort, though, it was nice, but there was no elevators, and there was a lot of stairs there. So and then I couldn't go in the pool, because I didn't realize they don't have stairs in the pools in Greece. It's a ladder. So you have to go into the pool, and then I'd have to pull myself up. And I couldn't do that with a broken arm, So, all right, I'm not going to get to use the pool. That was my favorite thing about the whole place. And I didn't get to do a lot of stuff that, my group, I sent them on some excursions that I just couldn't go on because I physically couldn't do it. But I did manage to get down to the beach and stick my feet into the Aegean Sea, because I was determined to do that. And it was difficult. My sous chef is actually my yoga instructor. So he was on the retreat with me, and it was really emotional for us, because we had to reschedule the trip twice. And like, when we got there, we just started bawling, because we couldn't even believe we were there. And I couldn't even believe I made it, But my guests that came were so wonderful, because I felt guilty too, because I wasn't the retreat leader that I wanted to be, because I was disabled. Like, I couldn't go on. I had scheduled a foodie tour for them. I couldn't go on it because I couldn't walk on the cobblestones, and I had to send them off. And they were so gracious and totally understanding. but it was hard for me to sit in the room and know that they're off having this time and I should be there. But it was a trip of a lifetime. The resort owners were so wonderful to us, and they were so great to me being disabled. It's hard when you're surrounded by all these yoga people, and I did yoga every morning. I did it in the chair. And I felt fabulous when I got home. I really did. I felt really good. And I was so damn proud of myself for going, but it was really hard. And we did book another one. We're going in May of 2027, at the end of April, beginning of May. And I've got a lot of things planned. And this time I'll be able to do a lot more things. So I'm so excited to go back. But yeah, there's, I'd like to go to plan a few different yoga, not yoga, well, retreats. We offer yoga anyways, because that's just a benefit. But for me, it's more like we took a cooking class, and that was hard for me too, because I couldn't stand there in the kitchen. So I had to be in a chair. But it was a family owned hotel. It wasn't the place we stayed. It was a different place. And they were so wonderful to us. They did a whole photo shoot behind the scenes. They were taking photos of us unbeknownst to us. And then they send it to you via email. And I was in tears. I was like, because they captured such beautiful moments, because there was a mother and son there. There was a husband and wife. And then there were two sisters. And, just catching these moments of people cooking in the kitchen. And it was all fresh ingredients from Greece. And they told us their family actually was from Massachusetts. They had moved to Greece 26 years ago and started the hotel and restaurant, but they were originally from Massachusetts, which was really cool. And the whole place was all run by family, like everybody, the children's, the aunts, the uncles, the grandmothers, everybody worked there, and they had a goat farm. But it was the most special thing. And I'm glad that I went and I didn't chicken out and turn around and go home. The trip home was a little better because I knew what to expect, because I think that was the hard part going. I had no idea, and I'm traveling to another country. I think I ended up at 3 different countries, with all the planes I had to take. But now I feel like fearless when it comes to traveling. If I could do that, in the shape I was in, now I feel like nobody can give me an excuse for not coming on the retreat either. Because if I can do it, you can do it. But yeah, so that was a great.
Yeah. How did you handle, because I was in Costa Rica last year, and the immigration lines took hours. We were just standing in the immigration lines, took hours to get through. Did they have someone that was with you, or how did you?
Yeah, the wheelchair service people went
Wow.
right through. You don't have to stand in line. And I
Wow.
told the guy, I'm like, I need to do this every time I travel. Because
Get
yeah,
the wheelchair service every time.
yeah, there's no waiting in line. In fact, there was one time when I was getting on the plane. It was a plane that you had to go outside and climb up the stairs.
Mhm.
They brought me on this machine. It was so cool. That raised up into the air, and I got to, go up on top. That was like the coolest thing. So
Oh my gosh.
all of the airports were like that. They were really good to you if you were disabled. So that helped a lot. And
Yeah.
none of them would take tips, because I tried to tip them because they were just so kind.
Yeah.
But in Europe, they just don't do that.
Mhm.
But yeah, thank God I didn't have to wait in any lines, because I couldn't. I
Yeah.
couldn't.
So now the plan is you're creating this kids culinary
Yeah,
experience, cooking school type of thing. Is it going to be like a physical location where you're going to have the school
I
built out?
rent. Yeah, I rented a space. I hopefully get the keys April 1st. I'm in a business course right now called E for All. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No.
They used to be an in-person place in Boston, and now it's all online. So like there's 20 people in our cohort, they call it,
Mhm.
and they're from all over the United States. So I'm so glad they could do it online. And it's a 10-week program, and they've really helped me get all my financials done.
Oh, good.
And just everything's because I'm starting off with the summer program for July and August, and people are already signing up for summer programs. So I had to get it up and running and ready to go. Like I'm going to start advertising it this weekend. Because I hopefully will sell out, but I'll also offer adult classes at night because I do classes now, but a lot of the places that I do the classes in, they take like $20 a ticket from me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's sometimes I don't make any money at all after it's all said and done. So this way, like just the summer program will pay for the building for the whole year for me.
Wow.
Yeah, and so, but I'm going to offer classes all year. Like I'm going to do adult classes at night and teenage classes on the weekends. And eventually, once we get really established, I'll do an after school program as well. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that because it's something I've wanted to do for a long time.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah,
And so I know you had mentioned that at one point, you had gone through a very difficult situation, ended up going back to school for culinary, but
yeah.
what really inspired you? Because that's not something that we hear very often of like, oh, they just
Well,
went into the culinary field.
well, I was cooking for this family, and it's funny because when I was with my ex for 26 years, he did all the cooking. I had convinced myself that I didn't know how to cook. I would tell people
Mhm.
this. And then when I had to cook for this family, I learned, hey, I can cook and I'm pretty good at it and I'm
Yeah.
creative. And I was watching her son come home from culinary school and he would tell all these stories
Mm,
and I don't know, I was thinking, God, what am I going to do with myself? I need to find another career. I've got to do something. Because what had happened was my son was in a terrible accident and I couldn't work for 6 months. He was in a wheelchair. So
wow.
that's how I ended up losing my house. I had no income. I had to take care of him. Um, and then it was like, okay, now what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
What am I going to do now that, okay, so he got better and I'm homeless,
Yeah. Yeah.
jobless. I've got to get my shit together. So when I started cooking, like I said, it was really healing. Like I would cry while I was cooking and it fed my soul, honest to
Mm,
God. And it just ignited something in me. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll go to cooking school because I've always been an entertainer. Like my family and friends used to call me Martha Stewart because I threw parties like nobody's business. And I've always loved doing that. But I never cooked like big meals. It was more like, casseroles and I'm
mhm,
great at hors d'oeuvres and desserts, like stuff like that. Like originally wanted to be a baker. I couldn't get a
mhm.
job as a baker either. You have to have baking experience.
Yeah.
Well, how am I going to get experience if nobody will hire me?
Yeah.
So that's when I
Yeah.
ended up in the restaurant. But I'm glad I went through the restaurant because I earned my chef title. And I
Mm,
wouldn't have
yeah.
that title. Like some people don't understand that. Like Rachel Ray does not call herself a chef because she's not.
Mm,
She's a cook. And there's a lot of people who will not call themselves a chef because they know there's like a respect and you have to earn that. You have to work your way through the kitchen and be given a chef title by another chef.
yeah.
Otherwise, you're not a chef. So I was like so proud of myself, at my age, and I'm an older woman, and I was like, I'm earning this chef title if it kills me. If I'm
Yeah.
stuck in a restaurant and I don't want to be in a restaurant, I'm gonna. That thing too is my dad has always instilled in us, and I tell people this: whenever I had a job, even if I hated it,
Mhm.
he would always tell us, "You be the best one at it." Like he say, yeah, some people got to be the trash man. Somebody's got to do it. He said, but guess what? If I was a trash man, I would be the best damn trash man that company ever had. And he
Mhm.
always instilled that in us, be the best of whatever it is you're going to be. And so I've always done that. My sister's the same way. We're always at the top of, the best worker. We never call in sick. We're never late, that type of thing. So that's how I was in the kitchen. I applied that and it was like, I'm going to be the best salad maker. I'm going to be the best person on the grill. I'm going to, and you master that station until you move to the next station. And
Mhm.
it's funny because my boss said to me at the time, he said, I knew the day I interviewed you that you were going to be my sous chef one day. And I was like, wow. He's like, well,
That's
it,
amazing.
yeah. So it was, and it's sad because COVID really did destroy that for us. But again, I look at it as a good thing because I would probably still be working 60,
Mhm,
70 hours a week, busting my tail. And I didn't see my family when I was at the restaurant. So
mhm.
it is a whole nother life for me where I can see my family and probably make just as much money, if not more, and have a life at the same time. And like my friend said, hopefully change some lives too,
Yeah,
make a difference, so it all works out. I really truly believe that,
yeah,
you
that's
know,
incredible.
yeah.
And mhm,
I would say, I think a lot of people tried to turn COVID into, something positive. I mean, not everybody, but if you were smart, that's what you did. You took
yeah,
and you turned it into something good. So,
that's what the successful people do, you
yeah,
know? It's like when hard things happen, you try to figure out how can I turn this into a positive thing?
absolutely. That's why I tell people you got to pivot.
Mhm.
That's my number one skill is pivoting. When there's a problem, I have a friend who said, "You are the problem solver." Like it could be the biggest disaster and you find a way out. And I'm like, you have to. What are you going to do? Lay down and die? No, you figure it out,
Love
Like
it.
even with the kitchen, when there's things that go wrong in the kitchen, you're in the middle of dinner service. You got to figure that out in a restaurant. It's,
Yeah,
there's no way around it.
yeah,
So I've learned that too. You figure it out, and those are things I want to share with other people because I do think, there's the world just needs more love and
mm,
positivity and helping each other.
yeah. How do you feel like cooking and the act of teaching people how to cook, how do you feel that that does that?
Oh, I love teaching people how to cook because people don't realize what a science it is. Like when you go to make
Mhm,
a sauce, a saute sauce, you're putting things in the pan and they look a certain way. And we teach them, don't touch it. Don't because
mhm,
people want to rush. And it's even when you're cooking a piece of chicken, don't touch it. We tell them, and until it will tell you when it's ready to be flipped, and when they do it right or when they see that sauce come together, like you're making it sauce and it's like you got to wait till it's bubbly and it's got to be all bubbly and we show them this, look for this, and their faces are just like wow, because it's
mhm.
like a science experiment. And
Yeah.
then the sauce all comes together and they put it on the plate and they taste it and they're like, what? Like, who would have known? I could, you take all these ingredients together and it makes this. But then watching them do it themselves is like,
Mhm,
it's in watching their faces light up, even grown-ups, but I especially love the teenagers. And I actually had a server who came to me one time in the restaurant and said, you have a way with those teenagers. You just know how to talk to them, how to give them confidence and patience. That was the other thing. A lot of chefs do not have patience, especially to teach other people, and they'll push you out of the way and do it themselves. And I just think that's so wrong because
mm,
people want to learn,
yeah,
and once they learn, it gives them power. It makes them feel so good and like they can do hard things,
yeah. What do
Yeah.
you think it is about like that those teenage years that are so attractive to you?
Because some of them don't know what they want to do with their life. Like when I was on the Plum Island in that restaurant, we would get a lot of teenagers who, oh my gosh, they didn't even know how to wash the floor. Like I would tell them, you need hot water, right? What do I need hot water for? To wash the floor. A lot of them, their parents just wanted them to have a job and they never even changed the toilet paper roll. So we were teaching them basic things, and I feel like some of them, because they didn't learn things at home, felt like they weren't capable.
Mm,
So I'm now giving them these skills and they're leaving there at the end of the day feeling really good about themselves. And I've had them come up to me and say, you were such a role model. Like I've learned so much from you and I can't thank you enough. I've had them write me letters saying I was like another mom.
oh,
Um, yeah. And like my sous chef, even, I actually thought he was going to be a chef one day because he was very intuitive. You taught him something, he could pick it up. But he still cooks with me, but his passion is astrology, and he's traveled all over the world. At 18 years old, he's gone to Egypt and all these countries studying the stars. And it's, and I do feel like I might have had a part of that, because when he came in, he was this little scared teenager who
Mhm.
started out washing dishes, and I brought him all the way up to saute. And
Mhm.
I feel like I do give them that confidence and empowerment, where even if they don't ever become a chef, they know that they can do anything if they just try and learn,
Yeah.
listen. And I feel like that's what people get working in a kitchen. Like, there's nothing like working in a kitchen. And I'm so glad that I did, because you learn so many skills. You learn teamwork and camaraderie and how to have each other's back. Because if you
Mhm.
don't have each other's back, service is going to go down, and then all the waitresses are going to hate you. Like, learn, like, it's a teamwork that I don't think you can learn in another industry. And I think that it's teenagers need to learn a lot of those skills. So that's what I love. I love when they leave the restaurant. Like, I see some of the kids now, like one of them's moved to California and she's a nutritionist, and then another one lives in Colorado, and I love watching their Instagrams and seeing them grow and change. And not all of them continue in the food industry, but I can't help but feel I had a little bit of part in them having more confidence. So
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. And cooking is something that everybody has to do, right? Like you have to feed yourself. It's a basic survival need. And
yeah,
so knowing how to do that and knowing how to do that well
yeah.
is such an amazing skill in and of itself.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because I don't think people realize how many people do not know how to cook.
Mm.
When
Yeah.
I started doing cooking classes, I was blown away at
Mhm.
how many people, I would say 1 in maybe 15 people know how to cook. Like, almost everybody doesn't know how to cook. And it's not their fault. We just
Yeah.
grew up in a different generation where my kids were fast food kids.
Yeah.
We were at soccer, we were at dance class, we were karate, and we would hit the fast food on the way home because it was late. It was
Mhm.
easy. And I didn't really know how to whip a meal together because nobody really taught me. And my ex, like I said, he did the cooking, but it was mostly on the weekends. um,
Yeah.
During the week, it wasn't like that. So I think cooking is a skill everybody should have. I really
Mhm.
do. So I'm hoping too, by opening the kids cooking school, because we're starting them out at 3 years old. So that
Wow.
we have a group 3 to 5 is our morning session, and then our afternoon session is going to be 6 to 12.
Mhm.
And but I think there's room for all of them to learn, and the confidence that they gain, and the skills, friendships that they make. Nowadays the kids are all on their screens, and get them off of the screens, get them in the kitchen, and make those memories at home. Once they learn to love it at my school, I hope they take that home, and it you know
Mhm.
goes throughout the whole family.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I'm curious, now that you know how to cook, do you cook all of your meals at home? Do you eat out?
Oh, it's
How
funny
do
you
you
say
manage
that.
it?
I do go out. um some places are good. Not like, it's hard because I'll be like, oh, I could make this better, but I would never say that. Like, I'm not a complainer. Like, I have friends who will go into a restaurant and, like, I'm a chef, to the waitress or whatever. And you know what the waitress does, buddy? She goes right back to the kitchen and tells them there's an asshole on table number
Right.
9. I don't ever tell anybody I'm a chef when I go to a restaurant. Never.
Yeah.
No. And I'm very polite, and I won't send something back unless it's really bad. Um, but I have my favorite restaurants, but sometimes I go to places and I am disappointed. And I think I wasn't like that, because before it'd be like, oh, anything's better if somebody else cooks it. And I do feel like I've learned so much that
Mhm.
it's funny you say that because I'll sit down and I'll cook something. I'm like, oh my God, that is so good. Like when I make meals for other families and I have a little left over and I'm like, oh my God, they're going to love this one. Like, and it's like, I'm so proud of myself because I can cook that good.
Yeah,
Not everybody can. You can try and teach people, but not everybody can pick it up.
that's amazing. What's
Yeah.
your favorite type of food to cook?
Saute. I love sauteing sauces and like pastas and seafood saute dishes, anything with wine. I love anything I can light on fire. So in saute we use a lot of alcohol, and it burns off, but when I was in the restaurant, I'd have like 12 to 16 pans going all at once.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. And half of them were on fire. So I'm used to that. But we had an open kitchen too. So it was great for the customers. They loved watching it. They'd sit there and be
Mhm.
mesmerized watching us. So we also had to be really vigilant and on our toes because we were being watched. It was like,
Mhm.
even if the night was going bad, you didn't show it,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
waited until you could go in the walk-in and cry, or you
yeah.
just you didn't show it in front of the customers. But yeah, I love saute. That's my favorite.
That's amazing. So I'm gonna two more questions. So
Yeah.
one, if somebody was trying to get started with cooking, what's some quick advice that you would give them?
Start with knife skills because it everything needs to be uniform. People don't understand that you can't just chop something up and throw it in a recipe.
Mhm.
Knife skills will change everything for you. It will make your cooking so much easier. And learn how to do mise en place. And that's, get all your ingredients lined up and ready to go. Even if you put them in separate containers, and clean as you go. That's my number one. Clean. My ex was a tornado in the kitchen. Oh, he would use every single pan that we had. It was crazy. But if you clean as you go, I can make an entire Thanksgiving dinner. And by the time we sit down, you go in my kitchen, it looks like I was never in there
Mm.
because I clean as I go. And that's a skill that I would teach all the teenagers too.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes a difference. It makes it more enjoyable for you too, because when you get done cooking and there's this huge mess, that's no fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And if you were to talk to a business owner who's going through a difficult time in their business and is really struggling, what would be your pieces of advice for them?
I'd want to sit down with them and find out what they're struggling with and see if I could help them find a solution.
Mhm.
And if I couldn't help them, I'd like to refer them to someone in my network because I feel like I built a really good network.
Mhm.
And let them, try and raise their spirits and tell them to remain hopeful and positive. And that there's always help out there. You just got to ask for it. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love that. So we will make sure that we put all of the links in the description. So if you want to get in touch with Chrissy, check out her school, anything like that, we'll have the links in the description. Chrissy, did you have any last words you wanted to leave with the viewers today?
Oh, I don't, just never give up. And everything happens for a reason. And just know it's always going to work out for the best.
That's
So
beautiful. I love that.
thank you. Thank you for having